you had mentioned this term belt factory. Another term that, gets thrown around a lot is like the dojo. Can you share for our viewers, because a lot of my students are just starting out and may have no idea what these terms mean. Can you kind of break them down a little bit and tell them, what do you mean by a belt factory?
How do I explain it? So what happens is when somebody joins a school, if they're getting a new belt every 6 or 8 weeks, they feel like they're making accomplishment, and it's incentive. It keeps them motivated, so they stay around longer. I'm okay with that philosophy, but at some point you need to have a standard where your students can do well. Now, I'm not saying the same standard for every person, but the standard for that individual student, right? If somebody comes in and they have a learning disability, they're not going to perform the same standard as somebody else. If they have physical conditions, they're all starting at different points, right? But at some point, you got to make it where they earned it.
Mr. Sorce, I'm so honored to have you on our show. I know you just tested for your 7th degree black belt. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. It was more of a demonstration. When you get to this level, the groups I'm in, it's more of a recognition. I did not have to, but wanted to do something for it,
That's awesome. Is that in Taekwondo or in some other discipline?
It was Taekwondo, but at this point we all cross-trained, so my demo kind of incorporated other stuff, but I wanted to show the Taekwondo aspects as well as part of it.
That's awesome. So, Mr. Sorce, can you give me a little bit of backstory on your training and how you got started with your school there in Milwaukee or wherever it is?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started when I was 6 years old, fell in love with it. I had a couple things going on. I had asthma, and it was pretty severe when I was young, so other traditional sports didn't work out as well for me. And then I also have a condition in my hands where my hands only turn this far. I cannot turn my hands completely over. So certain activities did not bode well for that limitation. And what was cool about martial arts is that you could modify things to make it work for you. So I remember my parents took me to Summerfest. Summerfest is like this awesome music festival in Milwaukee. And they had a sports arena, and they had a karate demonstration. And I saw it, and I just went, wow. My parents heard respect, discipline, focus. Everyone can do it. And my parents heard that message, and what they did is they looked around at different schools. They didn't take me. They went and picked the school first. They said, oh, I like it here. Then they brought me there and hit it off and fell in love with it. Never stopped. So you asked about like getting to the school, right? Mm-hmm. So as a kid, I dreamed of it, having a school. I had on graph paper, I used to draw out like layouts of schools. I must have done 100 of them. My parents says, you need a real job, you need a real career. You can't do that. You got to have insurance and retirement. So I went the engineering route. While in college, I started a part-time community program. Mm-hmm. And then that just grew till there. I did the engineering thing for a while. Was not very happy with that. Got divorced, moved home with mom and dad at 28. Fun. And opened a school, and I did full-time engineering, full-time school for a year, and then made the plunge. So I haven't turned back, yeah.
So it just took 1 year for you to get fully up and running with your new school.
Correct. I mean, at that point, I had, made my initial investment, saved money. I'd say the point that I broke off, the school was paying for itself, like the monthly bills was covered when I quit. Mm-hmm. And I had some savings in from my engineering job to live on to make it work. Mm-hmm. And boy, the first few years we didn't make much income.
Yeah, it's tough. I feel you. Wow. So quite a journey. How have you been through this pandemic? I'm sure this has been hard on your school and stuff like that, or have you been doing pretty good?
It was not easy. Compared to a lot of colleagues I have, we fared much better than others. We quickly adapted like immediately. Like the second we were told we couldn't, we went to online classes like that. I think that first week we recorded classes for people to do. And then the next week we went online to Zoom. And it I'm kind of proud of the way we did it because we went to the extreme. We had classes for every group. Every we do a rotating curriculum, so every group, rotating group, we had a separate class for age group, and so it was a lot of work, but it was worth it. But the other thing I did too is I brought in a team. So at any time there's 3 or 4 of us in there, and we're there teaching online for 4 or 5 hours. What we did is we rotated through. So somebody would man the computer, somebody would be teaching, then we have a backup dancer or two, and then we would rotate. Now we might have broke some regulations there, having more than 2 people or, whatever, but we're all comfortable doing it.
Yeah.
And I think it made a better experience.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome. I mean, I think pivoting quickly was so important, and it was a real challenge, I think, for all of us. I don't know about for you, but teaching without really being able to move very far is a unique challenge. I think I've grown as an instructor over this last year immensely, trying to figure out new ways to do the same things I always used to do. Anyway, I want to kind of get to our main topic for today, which I think is something that I've thought a lot about. I think we're kind of kindred spirits on this. For me, I wanted to become a martial artist, not to make money, but because it was something I really love. Now, of course, we gotta feed our families and support people that we love. But at the end of the day, it's really important to me to be putting out good quality students and instructors and making a meaningful impact in the martial arts community. You had mentioned this term belt factory. Another term that gets thrown around a lot is like the dojo. Can you share for our viewers, because a lot of my students are just starting out and they have no idea what these terms mean, can you kind of break them down a little bit and tell them, what do you mean by a belt factory?
Yeah. Well, let me go back a step and say it's good to make money in martial arts as an instructor. If you do a good job and you run a good solid business, it's wonderful. I think most schools are out there are doing well. They're doing their best. Mm-hmm. And so I just want to get that out there. Just because you're a big school doesn't mean you're a belt factory, right? So what I mean by belt factory is how do I explain it? So what happens is when somebody joins a school, if they're getting a new belt every 6 or 8 weeks, they feel like they're making accomplishment, and it's incentive. It keeps them motivated, so they stay around longer. I'm okay with that philosophy, but at some point you need to have a standard where your students can do well. Now, I'm not saying the same standard for every person, but the standard for that individual student, right? If somebody comes in and they have a learning disability, they're not going to perform the same standard as somebody else. If they have physical conditions, they're all starting at different points, right? But at some point, you got to make it where they earned it. They put in the work and they did it. So a lot of schools, I think, take the easy way out and they say, hey, you get your black belt in 2 years. Basically, you show up, they help you through everything. You never get pushed. That's kind of what I consider like a belt factory. McDojo, you got to be kind of careful with it. But a McDojo to me is a school that seems to put the business ahead of the instruction. And what I mean by that is not, you got to have the business. You have to have that. But you can tell there's a certain feeling you get from certain people in certain schools where they really don't care as much about the people and the product they're putting out. And they're really more concerned with the bottom line. Are they paying the bills and that kind of stuff? And that, that's uncomfortable, and yeah.
Well, I think, you're just a little bit older than I am, but I feel like we kind of grew up in a similar generation where my instructors and myself, as I started becoming an assistant instructor in my school, started to see that this was something you could actually make money in. A lot of people back in the day didn't think this was possible. And when I started training, I trained in a basement dojo with moldy carpet and insulation hanging down from the ceilings. You go into the bathroom, there's no drywall. And it became, as we started to realize, like, okay, if we can incorporate some of these, like, fitness center kind of mechanisms and improve the quality in our school in those ways, we can actually make a very successful business, and we can do this professionally. And it's like back in the 90s, we started to kind of realize this, and we started to see all these schools that became really focused on how can we make money teaching martial arts. And I think because they were kind of young entrepreneurs and they were really zealous, they kind of lost sight of, no, I'm not saying all of them. I'm just saying there was a subgroup that kind of lost sight of like, why are we doing this in the first place? And like you said, like I really feel like, yeah, you should be able to make money. How long have you been training, sir? I've been training for 30 years. What occupation requires you to train for 30 years to do your job? Like that's a lot of time. Like you deserve to make money. But it's also, like you said, it's very important to put out a product that you respect and admire. And so that's really important to me. So here's the question, how can we have a successful martial arts school while retaining high standards?
Yeah, a lot of it's going to be the culture of your school and what your people know. So, for example, one thing I do a little bit different, and some of my colleagues, when I first mentioned to them, it was like they didn't believe me. They thought I was crazy. So, for example, I do a rotating curriculum. I pretty much keep everyone on schedule, kind of like a semester in school. If someone falls really behind, they miss when they have to repeat. We try not to do that. We try to keep people together. I'm looking at the long-term program, right? So let me go back a step. So I talked earlier about some schools, they rush people through, you get your black belt in 2.5 years. Now you have the other hand, we have like Mr. Miyagi, who has 3 students, and it takes 12 years to be a black belt. Well, the 12-year black belt's going to be better. The hard part is that person can't make a living that way. So there's got to be like this middle ground. So for me, it depends on the person, but a person can be a black belt in as early as 4.5, but more like 5 years. This is my program, right? So let's call it 5 years to become a black belt. Some people think that's crazy. Like, how can you keep people for 5 years to be a black belt? And then the rotating curriculum I do for the first year, I do every 3 months. Okay, is when they get to promote. After that, once they get to intermediate, it's 6 months. So they're literally on one pattern, one set of curriculum for 6 months before they can move ahead. And that time, we just make them better. Now there's somebody that maybe needed all 6 months to get it down, and then other person, maybe they had their curriculum down in 2 months. It doesn't matter. They're going to be better. We're going to produce better students. And guess what? I have nobody yelling at me, how come I'm not this belt? How come I should be a blue belt? My neighbor goes here. You know what? We don't worry about that. We're looking at the journey, the path. So my students don't know any different. Like they don't know that if they train at XYZ school, that maybe they could advance quicker. I just kind of keep everybody low, give them more time, and it works out. Now, when they get to be we have a black belt prep program. During that time, we have a special class for them. When they're going for their black belt, they have a class that's 6 months long to prepare them. If they're not ready, we have like cutoffs. We do pre-tests. If we're not ready, we sit down and say, hey, you need a little more time. Our black belt isn't necessarily someone who can fend off, 3 large attackers. That's not kind of how I am. It's more from a nutritional standpoint. Can they do all their patterns? Are they doing it to the best of their ability? Does it look sharp? Do they know it? Can they do the self-defense? Can they do some randomized self-defense? Can they do it correctly? Can they reasonably defend themselves better than if they never trained it? That's what I'm looking at. And it's like the aesthetics and all that. So, and it's awkward because you have people I have a couple of black belts with severe autism. Okay. Now, are they going to get their 4th degree black belt, 5th degree black belt from me? Probably not. But can they be a black belt for them? Yes. So I might be jumping around quite a bit here.
No, I love what you're saying. And, we do things a little bit differently, but a lot of what you do resonates with what we do here. So like our, minimum time for black belt is 5 years. And, for some people, that's a lot. Industry average is 3 years across the board, all disciplines. But, you look at styles like BJJ, it takes 10 years usually to get your black belt. But I think it just depends on what do you consider a black belt? Like what does a black belt indicate? Traditionally a black belt meant that you were a competitor. If you go over to Korea, they don't have color belt competitions. They just have black belt competitions. And it just meant that, okay, if you wear this belt, you can go onto an open forum against anyone. They could be sparring against us. You wouldn't want a white belt going out there and just getting their face obliterated. You know, you want them to have like some knowledge of the basics and be able to, you know, do reasonably well. And so that's, to me, what a black belt signifies. And, you know, 4-3 black belt traditionally, and, you know, Kodokan Judo and all the, you know, other styles that adopted that Dan system, means that you're, you know, an expert, you know, 4-3 black belt. And that's kind of, you know, what you're saying, like maybe not a 4-3 black belt. And a 4-3 black belt in traditional martial arts like Taekwondo and karate and judo and stuff like that is, in my mind, more equivalent to a BJJ black belt. You know, those things are more similar, but people, laymen, don't understand that. So they get kind of confused and they think, well, you know, this person says they're a black belt, but they're not the same skill as this other person says they're black belt. And that's true, because they mean very different things. No two black belts are the same or equal, in my opinion. You know, I think that's kind of the wisdom you learn over time as you've been in the industry for, you know, many years. So it sounds like you have a rotating curriculum. That's really interesting to me. I don't have personally a rotating curriculum. I've worked at schools that have in the past. I used to work, you know, a school called USA Taekwondo, Master Scott Lewandowski. Mm. I used to work there. I was one of his early students, and he had 3 different schools. And we went from just a, you know, belt rank specific curriculum, which at that time was very common. And then, you know, I can't remember when this started coming in, but around the like 2000s or so, people started to get into rotating curriculum. He kind of jumped on that bandwagon. And I've always, you know, I have no hard feelings against people who do rotating curriculum, but I just have trouble ensuring that everyone is learning their stuff and not having to push them through. So it's interesting to hear that you do that and you find success with that. Now, I also have trained in BJJ for a long time, and most BJJ schools have rotating curriculum, and their standards are very high. So there's no reason it can't be. But I think, like in the BJJ schools, they have, like, you know, all white belts are just learning like the fundamentals, and it's just rotating through the fundamentals, and then you go into like the intermediate, and it's rotating through the intermediate curriculum. And so if you do it kind of like that, I think it does work. It's just when you try to, you know, have like 15 tiers of belts, you know, and they're, you know, they're only at their belt for like 2 months, and then you're trying to like teach them everything they need to know, and people are coming once or twice a week, that they get kind of lost in the shuffle, and then they get, you know, they don't know hardly anything at all because they haven't really studied anything in detail.
Yeah, I think that the key, so for me, I found the opposite. I thought I could teach a better class. I thought I could actually create a higher quality students. And I think what it has to do with me is, so first year it's every, when I said it's 6 months at each belt, like 6 months from green to high green, 6 months from high green to blue. When I brought that to my colleagues, they looked at me like, how do you keep any students? Like, how come they don't all quit? Don't they get bored? I'm like, we teach awesome classes. No, they're not getting bored. They love it. And they're getting good. So if I can't get someone through all their curriculum and know it well in 6 months, we have other problems, right? And then what's the word is? So I think the trick is how well designed is your rotating curriculum? You know, which groups are you rotating? Like, it took me a while to figure out, like, oh, I have to keep white belts out of the rotation for their pattern. So white belt is like, get your feet wet, and then the next 3 ranks are a group. And to me, it doesn't matter if you learn form number 2 first and then learn form number 1 or number 3. They're similar. Yeah, 3 is a little bit harder, but how much harder is it? And then the fact is, in my basics kids class, I have one pattern to work on. So I don't have to divide my time towards this pattern, that pattern, and this pattern. Now when I'm working at one pattern, I can say, we're going to do stances only today. Okay, today we're going to do it. We're going to start in the middle and work the end. All right, then I can assess and say, oh, I'm going to do a line drill to work on our twin forearm block. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. We're going to, and just keep things exciting. I can make little team events. All right, you guys come on, you come out, blah, 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 blah. And then even what's nice, if I have a couple instructors, what I'll do is we have the kids can earn a form stripe. So once they earn their form stripe, we know they know their pattern. So I have enough instructors. What I can do is I can pull out the 8 kids that have their pattern, the kids that don't have their pattern, and make 2 classes on the fly. because there's enough instructors. So this class is like getting memorization. This group is getting the fine details. So it's like, before I had two instructors, well, they were each taking in different groups of forms, or 3 instructors, right? So I could never imagine going any different, and then it took a long time to develop, but then like for my adult class, I have curriculum boxing combinations up until black belt. I made 10 sets and I made them really, 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 really easy, really easy. Well, if you're a red belt, you're doing it for the first time. If you're a white belt, you're doing it for the first time. The red belt should be really good at it, while the white belt's kind of figuring it out. But the red belt's done enough other boxing combos where they get good at it, or I should call them mitt combos. So for that, man, that part of class is phenomenal. I have the whole room all doing the same thing at the same time. And hopefully they know the combination in the first month. Then the next 2 months is playing with it.
Yeah.
And then the last 2 weeks before testing, we scaled back to just a combo. And it's incredible. I mean, I started that, I think, shortly before the pandemic. And might have been 2 years. But now I got people, high yellow belt, green belt. You watch them do their jab, cross, or hook, and you're going, what the heck? They look like they've been doing it for 10 years.
Yeah.
So, and it's because of the way we were organizing. So,
yeah, I think there's a lot of wisdom there. We kind of took a little bit different approach. I mean, it's not that it matters at all. I think there's a lot of ways to skin a cat, and there's a lot of good ways to structure your curriculum. It is, I mean, I think that's one of the real challenges of being an instructor. I mean, there's so many different aspects of teaching that are difficult. Like how do you work with children? Like what's your rapport and disciplining, and how does that all work? And that's a real art in itself. But structuring your curriculum is also part of it. And for me, what I did is I never liked, when I looked out, when I first started in Taekwondo, we had like a white belt, and then I got 2 little yellow tips on my white belt, like electrical tape. And then, I remember, I didn't say this, but I remember the guy next to me was like, that's all I get? Like, I get 2 little tips, and then we get the yellow belt, and then we get like 2 green tips. And then, somewhere along the way, a lot of the masters were like, we can just give out a striped belt. Century started putting out these striped belts. And it's like, okay, so it's a white belt with like a yellow stripe through it, or maybe a black stripe through it. And some schools called like high white belts, or like, whatnot. And that's good. I mean, it gives somebody like the feeling of getting something actually tangible when you get the next rank. But when I look out over all my belts and I see like white belts, and then like a striped white belt, and then a yellow belt, and a striped yellow belt, it's busy to me. And there's something really elegant about that simplicity. So for what I did, I mean, everyone does things differently, but I basically just took out all the interim ranks. I was just like, there's a white belt, there's a yellow belt, there's a green belt, blue belt, and red belt, and black belt. That's it. There's nothing in between there. And I give out little merit stripes, to give them like some like incremental sense of accomplishment as they're moving up through the curriculum and mastering it at a higher level. But for me, that basically kind of makes a rotating curriculum, because you just got a bucket of techniques at a yellow belt level, bucket techniques at green belt level. And then I have like, basic classes, intermediate classes, and advanced classes. And so it kind of accomplishes a very similar thing. For me, this is just personal. Like, I don't mind rotating technique and throws and submissions and all kinds of, I don't care about that. But the forms, for me, I'm not a big fan of rotating, because for me, when I learned like when I learned like choreo, I don't know what patterns you do, but like when I learned choreo as a first degree black belt, it was like really special. Or when I got to second dan and I could learn pungang, I was like, yeah, like that was special to me. I don't want to rotate that. Anything else, I don't care about rotating, but the forms for me are kind of.
One thing I have to say about not rotating curriculum is there's definitely more accountability. So if you're in a class and you have 10 different forms going on, and you have to work on your form by yourself or with a partner, you have to be accountable. You can't just, so like my kids can sometimes, like, they can go through the form and keep up the class and they look really sharp.
Yeah.
And if they don't have the people around them as little, like, they know it, but they have a little cue. Like they might pause, and then, all they need is a little, yeah, I got to turn this way. And then they're good. And then boom, boom, boom. So we do lose a little bit of the accountability sometimes, but you got to weigh, you got to pick and choose what you got to pick and choose your battles,
Yeah. I mean, rotating is more fun because you're always doing different stuff. So, I mean, it's just, there's pros and cons.
Whatever works. Yep.
It's been a real pleasure having you on, and I think you have a lot of wisdom, to impart, and I wish you the best of luck with your school. I know I've heard really good things about it, and I'm sure you're going great places.
Yes, sir. Thank you much.
If you enjoyed that podcast, please consider liking and subscribing to our YouTube channel, as well as hitting the notification bell. We offer in-person, group, and private lessons at our facility in Kyle, Texas, as well as virtual lessons anywhere in the world. If you'd like to learn more about our programs, you can find us online at risingphoenixtkd.com.